It wasn't the message that broke me. It was the timestamp. 3:42 a.m. She sent, "I'll make it up to you," at 3:42 in the morning, a time when people either feel the most alive or the most afraid. For her, I guess it was both. But I wasn't there to see it. The message came through while I was driving past the county line, the kind of empty road where even your own headlights feel like they're trying to warn you. Her words were waiting on my lock screen, but I didn't touch them. I let them rot there in silence, like a half-buried apology. That message is still unopened. The truth is, by the time she realized what she had done, I wasn't a man she could reach anymore. I was something else entirely, something I don't think she ever expected. Let me back up, but not to when we met. Not to the good years. That part doesn't matter. I'm not here to sell you some perfect love story gone wrong. I'm here to show you how a person starts disappearing long before they pack a bag. And it started with the sound. There was this hum in the walls of our house. Not electrical, not mechanical, emotional. It was like the rooms themselves had started whispering things I couldn't admit out loud. Like they knew what was coming before I did. Every chair I sat in felt colder. Every mirror avoided my eyes. Every meal tasted like someone else had made it for someone else entirely. I was still living there, but the house had already kicked me out. She, on the other hand, was glowing, laughing more, smiling at nothing, typing too fast for someone who claimed she hated texting. She smelled like citrus, a perfume we didn't own. And one night, while brushing her teeth, she hummed a song I didn't recognize. When I asked her what it was, she said, "Something from work." But she didn't work with music. She worked in dental billing. There are no soundtracks in dental billing. So I started paying attention. She never saw me checking her phone reflection in the window. Never noticed me counting the seconds between her going to bed and the light from her screen lighting up the hallway. I didn't need to see names. I could feel them. Every buzz from her phone was like a conversation I wasn't invited to. And you know what's worse than betrayal? Rehearsed kindness. She kissed me on the cheek before leaving. Made my coffee just the way I like it. Folded my socks. Complimented my haircut, even though I hadn't had one in weeks. It wasn't love. It was a script, one she hoped would keep me quiet long enough for her to finish whatever she was doing behind the curtain. But I wasn't quiet. I wrote down every odd moment, every off phrase, every client dinner that didn't match her GPS history. I built a file, not because I wanted to confront her, but because I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't insane. And then one night, I found it. A hotel keycard in her purse. No logo. Just room 412 handwritten in faded ink. She was in the shower when I saw it. I didn't rage. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I placed it back exactly where it was and went into the kitchen. And I started boiling water, not for tea, but because I needed to hear something that wasn't silence. I left that night. She texted at 3:42 a.m. I never opened it, because by then, I wasn't her husband anymore. I was the echo of a man who had finally learned how to disappear. I drove for hours without music, without a plan, and without even checking the rearview mirror. It wasn't that I was trying to be poetic. I just couldn't bear to see what I was leaving behind, or worse, what might still be chasing me. You'd think the hardest part would be packing a bag and walking out the door, but it's not. It's when you realize the person you were begging to love you back didn't even notice you'd left. That silence. That's what really ruins you. I pulled into a rundown motel somewhere off Route 19. The kind of place where the carpet smells like bleach and disappointment. I didn't even ask how many nights I needed. I just handed the woman behind the counter my card and said, "I don't know." She looked at me like she'd seen 100 men like me before. Maybe she had. Room 108. That was mine. One light bulb flickered, the other was dead. There was a painting on the wall, a sailboat, crooked in the frame, sailing nowhere. I dropped my bag and sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing my jacket, staring at my phone. Her message was still there. "I'll make it up to you." I didn't open it, didn't delete it either. I let it rot on my lock screen, like a ghost I wasn't ready to bury. But even alone in that room, miles away, she was still in my head. Her laugh, fake now, but once genuine. Her voice in the kitchen on Sunday mornings, humming while making pancakes. The way she used to rest her head on my shoulder during movies, before she started turning away from me in bed. And then my mind, traitorous and fragile, started playing that dangerous game. What if I misread it all? What if she really was just tired? What if she wasn't cheating, just lost? That's the thing about people like me. We don't leave because we're sure. We leave because we're tired of doubting ourselves. Around 2 a.m., I cracked. I called her sister. Mallory picked up on the second ring, groggy but alert the second she heard my voice. "Conrad," she said, "is everything okay?" I almost laughed. I wanted to say, define okay, but I just asked her the one question I was afraid to know the answer to. "Is Mira with you?" The pause was too long. "No," she finally said, quiet and careful. She said she was staying late at work. "Why?" I thanked her and hung up. She wasn't at work. She wasn't with her sister. She wasn't anywhere she told me she'd be. I knew then, completely. There was no more doubt, no more hope. I lay down on that creaky motel bed fully clothed, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how someone who used to hold your hand like they'd never let go could so casually let it slip away. I thought about the hotel keycard, room 412, about the mystery song she kept humming, about all the tiny lies that added up to a life I didn't recognize anymore. Sleep never came. By morning, I had a new plan. Not revenge, not confrontation, something quieter, something she would never expect from me. I was going to disappear the right way, not just physically, emotionally, digitally, completely. And when I vanished, when I erased myself from her maps, her routines, her excuses, I wanted to see if she'd even bother to look. Spoiler, she did. But by then, it was far, far too late. By the time the sun came up, I had deleted my cloud backups, turned off location sharing, and wiped the shared calendar she never used anyway. I wasn't running. I was unexisting, carefully, piece by piece. My bank app showed a few $1,000s, enough to keep me drifting for a while. My work? I called and quit, told them I wouldn't be coming back. My boss asked if I was sure. I said yes, even though I wasn't. But what was I supposed to do? Go back to my desk, print reports, and pretend like my life hadn't just collapsed in slow motion? I stopped by the house once more. Just once. Middle of the day, when I knew she wouldn't be there. I parked 2 blocks down, walked with my hood up, like I was breaking into someone else's life. And maybe I was. The front door still stuck a little when I opened it. The hallway smelled the same. Vanilla and denial. I didn't take anything she'd notice. Just the old Polaroid of my dad and me fishing, my backup drive, my birth certificate. I stood in our bedroom for a while. The bed was made, but her side looked rumpled, not from sleep, but like someone had been sitting on the edge in hesitation. There was a coffee mug on the nightstand. Mine, still warm. That hit me in a weird way. I hadn't been there in 24 hours. Why was my mug warm? I walked to the closet. She hadn't packed anything. Everything was still there. Her scarves, her shoes, the red jacket she wore on our first trip together. I touched nothing. I wanted to remember the chaos as it was, untouched, unfiltered. But then I saw it. On the dresser. A receipt. Room 412. Same number as the keycard I found in her purse. Only this time, it had a date. Yesterday. And a time. 4:36 p.m. I stood there, eyes burning. I could feel my fingertips buzzing like my body was preparing for a confrontation that wouldn't come. She had checked in while I was at the motel. While I was pacing that room, wondering if I was overreacting, she was in his room, doing things I could only try not to imagine. And she left this damn receipt, out in the open like she was untouchable. Like I was too stupid to put it all together. It was deliberate. Maybe not the act itself, but the carelessness. That's what killed me the most. She didn't even try to cover it up. Like I'd already been written out of the story and didn't deserve an explanation. I left the house without saying a word to anyone. No note this time. No dramatic goodbye. Just me, a duffel bag, and a soul that felt like wet paper, heavy and fragile and barely holding together. 2 hours later, I was parked at a rest stop eating crackers I didn't want when my phone buzzed again. Her name lit up the screen. The preview said, "Can we talk?" I think I I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what came next. A mistake. A moment of weakness. A drunken error. All the usual excuses. But you know what? Mistakes are what you make when you forget your keys. Not when you forget who someone is. I turned off my phone. Entirely. And for the first time in years, I felt quiet. Not peaceful. I wasn't that lucky. But quiet. Like the world had stopped screaming at me to fix something I didn't break. I didn't know where I was going next. But I knew I wasn't going back. I drove until the road started to blur into a gray ribbon and the gas gauge was threatening me. The town I finally pulled into didn't even have a name on the sign, just a peeling blue board that said, population 612, and a rusted arrow pointing left. I don't know why I stopped there. Maybe because it looked like the kind of place no one ever looked for anyone. I parked outside a diner with flickering neon that said, "Open," even though the inside looked dead. A woman with a white braid and a name tag that said June poured me black coffee before I even asked, like she could see the runaway written all over me. She didn't ask questions. That was good. I had too many answers, and none of them sounded real. I sat there for hours, stirring sugar into a cup I never drank. My phone was still off, but the weight of it in my pocket felt like a bomb I was too scared to defuse. Every time my hand brushed it, I imagined another text from her piling up, another plea, another half-truth. "Please call me. This isn't what you think." I can explain. But the thing about explanations is they're just stories you tell to make someone stay. I didn't want her stories anymore. I wanted the truth she'd hidden so well I had to burn down my own life to find it. At one point, I caught my reflection in the diner's dark window and almost didn't recognize myself. My eyes looked like someone who had been awake for years. My shoulders were hunched, like I was trying to make myself smaller. I realized that's what I'd been doing all along, shrinking, apologizing for existing, trying to be easier to love. And she'd taken every inch I gave until there was nothing left but a man sitting in a diner in a town without a name, stirring coffee that had gone cold. Around sunset, a semi pulled into the parking lot. A tall man in a ball cap got out, nodded at me, went inside. He smelled like diesel and road dust. He asked June for pie. They talked like they'd known each other forever. I envied how easily strangers connected here. No history, no lies, no receipts from hotel rooms. Just pie and small talk. I wondered if I could stay. If I could build a life here as the man who vanished. If she would ever even find out where I went. And then, because I'm weak, I turned my phone back on. It buzzed like a wasp's nest the second it lit up. 17 messages. For missed calls. All her. The previews on the lock screen formed a grim timeline. "Where are you? I'm sorry. It's not what you think. Please let me explain." And then the one that made my stomach turn. "I'm at the motel. Please come back." The motel. She didn't even say which one. Just the motel. Like she knew exactly where I'd been hiding. My first thought was that she'd tracked me somehow. Some app one forgot to disable. My second thought was worse. Maybe she'd been there before with him. Maybe that's why she was so sure. I sat there shaking, staring at the screen, coffee forgotten, the room tilting. June walked past me and quietly refilled my cup. She didn't look at me. She just said, softly, "Some places you leave, you don't go back to." And then she went back behind the counter like she hadn't just read my soul. I put the phone face down and pressed my palms together, trying to stop the tremor. I could go back. I could confront her. Demand answers. Get the scene everyone expects. Shouting, tears, maybe even some twisted apology. Or I could stay gone. Keep moving. Erase myself completely before she had the chance to drag me back into her orbit. I stayed in that booth until the neon sign flickered off and the diner closed. And when I finally walked out into the cool night air, I realized my hands weren't shaking anymore. My phone was still on the table. I left it there. No goodbye, no forwarding address. Just silence. And somewhere behind me, in some room with some man, or maybe alone, she was still typing messages to a number that no longer existed. The next morning, I woke up in the cab of a truck parked behind the diner. Not because I'd planned it, but because the driver with the ball cap had offered me a place to crash. His name was Roy. He didn't ask my name, and I didn't offer it. We sat there in silence while he smoked, and the smoke curled out the window like secrets leaving a room. He dropped me off 2 towns over without a word, and when I stepped onto the cracked pavement, for the first time in days I realized I had no phone, no job, no plan, and, weirdly, no panic. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, but being too tired to be afraid of falling. I checked into another cheap motel with cash, the kind of place where the front desk clerk doesn't even glance up. The carpet was sticky, the walls thin, the TV stuck on some static-filled local channel. I sat on the bed and stared at my hands, wondering if this was what freedom actually looked like. A man who'd hollowed himself out so completely there was nothing left for anyone to reach. But even here, in this nowhere room, she was still there. Every movement I made was still shaped by her absence. Every thought still circled back to the receipt, the keycard, the half-smile she gave her phone. I kept telling myself I'd left because I was done, that I'd been decisive. But the truth, The ugly, embarrassing truth is that I wanted her to come looking. Not with a message, not with a half-hearted apology, but really looking. Driving from motel to motel, showing up at a counter, breathless, saying my name. Proving, for once, that I was more than just a placeholder in her life. And the thought that she might not do that she might just shrug and move on, made my chest feel like it was folding inward. I turned on the TV to drown my thoughts, but the sound only made it worse. A commercial for some beach resort played, couples laughing in slow motion, waves crashing behind them. It looked like a life from a different planet. A life where people didn't leave each other messages at 3:42 a.m. that they'd never read. I shut it off, sat in the dark, and began to write. Not a letter to her, not a journal entry for myself, but a list. Every small moment that had led me here. The way she used to pull her hand away first when we crossed streets. The first time she told a story to friends and left me out of it. The night she came home with citrus on her wrists. I wrote until my hand cramped, until the paper tore from pressing too hard. It wasn't revenge, it was a map of my own erasure. By dusk I decided to walk. There was a gas station a mile away, and I thought maybe the walk would clear my head. Halfway there, a car slowed behind me. Old sedan, headlights dim, engine rough. My stomach flipped. I didn't need to see who it was to know. The car rolled up beside me, window lowering slowly. And there she was. Mira. Hair a mess. Face pale. Eyes rimmed red like she hadn't slept. She didn't say my name. She just looked at me like I was some animal she'd cornered on the side of the road. And in that split second I realized. She wasn't here to confess. She wasn't here to beg. She was here because she didn't like not knowing where I was. She reached out a hand, trembling, but not from remorse. From anger. From control slipping through her fingers. "Get in," she said, voice cracked but commanding. I didn't move. She tried again. "Please. We can talk." But her eyes didn't match her words. They weren't soft. They were sharp. Like she was already rehearsing the story she'd tell about this moment. How she'd convinced me to come back. How everything would go back to normal. And then, for the first time in 10 years, I laughed. Not a real laugh. A small, broken sound that even startled me. "No," I said. Just one word. And her face, her perfect, practiced face, flickered. For a heartbeat. She looked like a stranger caught without her mask. I turned and kept walking. Her car idled for a moment, then sped off. She didn't follow. When I got back to the motel, my hands were still shaking, but for a different reason. I wasn't just running anymore. I was finally, painfully, choosing myself. That night in the motel was the first time I didn't just feel gone. I felt invisible. I sat in the dark by the window, curtain pulled just enough to watch the parking lot. Every set of headlights that rolled past made my pulse jump. I told myself I was being paranoid, but something about Mira showing up on that road meant she was willing to go further than I thought. She hadn't chased me out of love. She'd chased me out of panic. And panic makes people dangerous. I poured myself the last of the motel's bitter coffee and forced myself to think like a stranger. If I was watching this as a movie, what would happen next? The husband would break, would cave, would climb back into the car because it's easier than staying gone. That's how these stories always end. But sitting there, with my heart beating against my ribs like a trapped bird, I realized this wasn't a movie. This was my life, and I had a chance to write the next scene differently. I opened my bag and took out the crumpled pages I'd been writing on. Looking at them now, under the dim lamp, it struck me how much of my own life I'd archived in secret. The receipts, the little lies, the nights alone, even the sound of her humming songs she wouldn't name, all of it was on those pages. It wasn't just evidence. It was a portrait of a man slowly disappearing from his own marriage. For the first time in months, I didn't feel crazy. I felt documented. Seen, at least by myself. At some point after midnight, there was a soft knock at the door. Not a pounding, not a call from the lobby, just a polite, careful knock. 3 times. My entire body froze. I didn't move. The knock came again, slower, like whoever was out there knew I was inside and wanted me to know they could wait. The motel walls felt thinner than paper. My mind ran every scenario. Mira found me. Mira sent someone, Myra's lover following me, or maybe just some drunk guest at the wrong door. But my gut said otherwise. I stayed still for a full 10 minutes, hardly breathing, until footsteps retreated and a car engine started up outside. I peeked through the curtain and caught a glimpse of a dark sedan pulling out of the lot. Same dull headlights as before. My skin crawled. It wasn't just paranoia. She was tracking me. Or he was. Maybe both. I didn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., I started packing again, but slower this time. Not in a panic, in preparation. I tore up the pages I'd written and flushed them down the toilet one handful at a time, like some kind of ritual cleansing. It hurt to destroy them, but I couldn't risk her finding them. I left only one thing on the desk, the hotel keycard from her purse, room 412. I placed it upright against the lamp where the light would hit it like a spotlight. If she came in here looking for me, it would be the only thing she saw, a mirror of her own secret staring back at her. Then I slipped out before dawn, bag slung over my shoulder, moving like a ghost through the hallways. No phone, no forwarding address. Just the sound of my own footsteps, steady and deliberate. I walked past the front desk without a word and stepped into the gray morning air. Somewhere behind me, she was still writing messages she'd never send or never mean. Somewhere ahead of me, there was a life without her shadow. I didn't know yet what it looked like, but for the first time, I didn't care. All I knew was that I wasn't just running anymore. I was rewriting. And this time, there would be no 3:42 a.m. text to drag me back. By the time I crossed into the next state, the sky was just starting to glow faint pink at the edges, that cold, empty kind of dawn where even the birds haven't decided if it's worth singing. My shoes were damp from the motel parking lot, my bag heavier than it had any right to be, and yet my chest felt hollow. Every mile between me and her should have felt like oxygen, but it was more like vacuum, pulling at me, trying to collapse me inward. I stopped at a rest area that looked like it had been built in the 70s and never updated, cracked benches, faded travel brochures, a vending machine humming like a tired animal. I sat on the edge of the picnic table and stared at the road. No phone, no car, no plan. Just a man who had finally walked out of a story he had spent 10 years convincing himself was still about love. For a long time I watched cars pass, each one a tiny universe with its own secrets and destinations, and wondered if Mira was behind one of those windshields, still chasing me, or if she'd already given up. The thought of her giving up should have felt like freedom, but it landed in my stomach like a stone. I hated myself for that. Hated that even after everything, a part of me still wanted her to prove she cared enough to keep looking. I imagined her scrolling through old pictures, rehearsing apologies, making up new versions of the truth to suit whichever narrative would bring me back. I imagined her waking up alone, realizing the key card I left on that desk wasn't a threat or a clue, but a mirror. And for the first time since I'd left, I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it was grotesque. We had both been living inside a lie so long that even our endings were scripted. Around mid-morning, a bus pulled into the rest area. Not a shiny coach bus, just an old inner-city line with peeling paint and a driver who looked like he'd seen it all. The destination sign flickered between letters. I didn't care where it was going. I climbed on, paid in cash, and sat near the back. The bus smelled of coffee and diesel and cheap perfume. Outside the window, the highway unspooled like a film reel, and I realized something strange. I wasn't scared anymore. Not of her, not of him, not of being found. The knock at the motel door, the car on the side of the road, the 17 unanswered messages, all of it had been designed to pull me back into the old version of myself, the one who apologized, who doubted, who stayed. And for the first time in a decade, I wasn't him. Somewhere after the third stop, an old man across the aisle started talking about his wife. 50 years married, still holding hands. He showed me a picture without asking if I wanted to see it. They looked so happy it almost felt like a different species. "You married?" he asked. I opened my mouth to answer and nothing came out. Not yes, not no. Just silence. He nodded like he understood anyway and went back to looking out the window. I sat there with my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles went white and thought about how many versions of me existed right now in her head. The coward, the villain, the man who left, the man who might come back. And I wondered how long before even in my own head I stopped being her husband and became just another ghost in her phone, a name she scrolls past without opening. The bus rolled on, humming, and the further it carried me, the more I began to see something forming at the edges of my mind. Not revenge, not confrontation, something quieter. A way of living that wasn't built around waiting for someone else to decide if I was worth staying for. It wasn't a plan, not yet, but it was a beginning. And as the wheels thumped over the seams in the road, I realized the story I'd been telling myself all along. That leaving was the end might have been wrong. Maybe leaving was the first honest thing I'd done in years. Maybe the man I was becoming wasn't a ghost at all, but something Mira had never expected. A man who finally stopped begging for an ending and started writing his own beginning. It was late afternoon by the time the bus finally slowed into a town I didn't recognize. Not because it was unfamiliar, but because for once, I wasn't looking for signs of her. I wasn't scanning every corner for a memory. I wasn't wondering who might be watching me, who might be calling from behind. I stepped off with my bag, shoes dusty, legs aching, but something inside me felt still. Not healed, not whole, but still, like the noise had finally stopped. The town wasn't much. One main street, a bookstore, a hardware shop, a barber shop with a sign that said cash only. The kind of place that didn't pretend to be more than it was. I rented a room above a bait shop from an old couple who asked no questions and offered strong coffee and better silence. I helped the man fix a broken shelf the first evening I was there, and for the first time in months, someone thanked me without needing to follow it up with a lie. It wasn't profound. It wasn't cinematic, but it was enough. Days passed, then weeks. I got a job hauling freight for a farm supply place. Honest work. No office politics. No fake smiles. I came home every evening with dirt under my nails and a body that ached in ways that felt real. I started cooking again. Badly at first. Burned rice, oversalted pasta. But I didn't care. No one was watching me. No one was judging. Slowly, I got better. I picked up a notebook again. Not to document betrayal this time, but to write stories. Little fragments. Not about her. Not about the past. Just about things I saw. A woman fixing her own flat tire. A kid teaching his dog to sit. Life, messy and small and uninterrupted. And then one day, without warning, I saw her name again. Not in person. Not a text. Not even a call. I was picking up supplies when I heard someone at the counter say her full name. Not Mira. Her full name. The clerk was reading it off a shipping label. My chest locked. The world slowed. But it wasn't her. Just someone who shared her name. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I didn't feel like running or screaming or breaking down. I just nodded to myself, quietly, and kept walking. That was the moment I knew I was free. Because freedom doesn't always come in some loud, triumphant declaration. Sometimes it comes quietly, wrapped in an ordinary moment you almost miss, when you realize you're no longer carrying the weight of someone else's choices. She never found me. Or if she did, she stopped trying long ago. I don't check. I don't care. The man she thought she knew, the one who always said yes, who made himself small, who stayed too long, he's gone. And the man who took his place doesn't live for apologies that never come or for messages sent at 3:42 a.m. I never opened that text. And I never will. Because I didn't need her to fix it. I fixed me.